#the order. Port Charles has always balanced on a knife's edge between family and fury, but this week the blade glints brighter than ever. Drew Kane opens his eyes after a near-fatal ordeal, and the first breath he draws drags the entire town into a sharper danger. Before the gunfire that put him under, Sonny Corinthos had already crossed a moral Rubicon in his mind, deciding that Drew's brand of disruption, half vengeance and half calculation, could no longer be contained. Now, with Drew awake and angling toward Michael Corinthos as his next target, Sonny's simmer snaps to a boil. The Don who has learned to show restraint in public and unflinching resolve in private doesn't hedge, doesn't negotiate, doesn't punt. He gives an order. The instruction is chilling in its simplicity and devastating in its implications: remove Drew, permanently. What looks at first like a classic gangster impulse carries far more history than a barked command. Sonny has kept Port Charles relatively stable by imposing boundaries: who gets touched, who is shielded, what lines never blur. That fragile code hinges on one immutable tenet: you do not threaten his family. Drew has spent months straddling a line between crusader and saboteur, pursuing justice when it suited him, weaponizing secrets when it didn't, and steadily convincing Sonny that chaos follows wherever Drew plants a flag. The hospital shooting merely crystallized a hostility that was already calcifying. Sonny's conclusion, harsh, absolute, is that letting Drew rise again means allowing an arsonist to keep a matchbox in a dry summer. Drew's awakening does not produce contrition. It produces focus. Flat on his back and bristling at the vulnerabilities that put him there, he channels the humiliation into a plan with a single pressure point: Michael. Drew's grievances with Michael are layered: old slights, parental entanglements, corporate betrayals, and a belief that Michael always finds a way to come out clean when others are smeared. Whether Drew seeks leverage, revenge, or a twisted version of teaching a lesson, the result is the same: he starts moving pieces that endanger Sonny's son. In any other town, that would be a family dispute. In this one, it's a declaration of war. Sonny's reaction is not merely paternal, it's strategic math. He sees the ripple effects before they touch shore. If Drew undermines Michael, ELQ trembles, Quartermain alliances wobble, and Corinthos territory looks tentative. Rivals watch, opportunists sharpen knives, and the fragile peace Sonny engineered, tolerated by cops, disliked by judges, but accepted by the street, fractures. Every father knows the gut punch when a child is threatened, every leader knows the cost of letting a public threat go unanswered. Sonny is both, and that dual identity compresses into a decision ordinary men don't face: protect the line, or admit the line was an illusion. He chooses protection, dressed in the ugliest tailoring he owns. The order itself travels like a cold front. It does not come with raised voice or spilled whiskey. It arrives as a quiet directive, specific, time-boxed, and plausibly deniable. The inner circle hears it first: loyalists who have stood through betrayals and reconciliations, who understand that hesitation can be lethal. Some nod with grim understanding, others flinch. Brick asks the questions that professionals ask: where, when, exposure, blowback, and starts sketching redundancies. A younger enforcer, feeling the weight of a final call, swallows hard. Dex, whether fully in Sonny's orbit these days or orbiting adjacent, understands the tilt of the world when Sonny speaks like this. He's seen what happens when orders outpace the soul trying to carry them out. Not everyone accepts the calculus. Michael, stubborn to a fault, tries to keep his own counsel while fury tampers with fear. He hates being protected at the cost of someone else's life, even when that someone is Drew. But love and rage mix into a combustible logic. If Drew is truly coming for him, personally, professionally, as a father, then the life raft Sonny offers looks less like tyranny and more like oxygen. Carly, who has weathered the worst of Port Charles storms and learned to read the barometer behind Sonny's eyes, recognizes the difference between a performative threat and a final straw. She pushes for another option: leverage, a trade, a bluff, but she also knows that the man she once married does not issue a command like this unless he believes there are no safe exits left. The law senses that something has shifted. Anna Devane doesn't need wiretaps to smell gunpowder on the wind. She hears it in the cadence of city rumor, in the edgy silence that settles over her most reliable informants. She has no patience for vigilante solutions and even less patience for body bags that write the last page of private feuds. If she can't stop the order, she can jam the lines, high-visibility patrols, surprise compliance checks, and a reminder to every would-be trigger man that prison beds are still made every morning. What Anna understands, and what makes her effective, is that this isn't only about two men, it's about preventing a ripple from becoming a wave that inundates her town with grief and copycats. On Drew's side of the chessboard, pragmatism flexes where pride would normally strut. He is not bulletproof, and he knows it. He changes routes, switches phones, and trims his circle to the smallest sliver of trust he can tolerate. If he once believed in the optics of righteous action, now he trusts only outcomes. Michael's vulnerability is not only his last name but the web of loyalties that name holds. Drew's thinking turns surgical, a rumor here, a contract complication there, a manipulated headline that makes a father look like a liability and a son look like a fool. He seeks to corrode reputation before he cracks ribs. Because in Port Charles, character assassination can sometimes be more permanent than the other kind. The ripple through the Quartermain estate is its own courtroom drama. ELQ shareholders hate uncertainty, auditors hate it more. Ned counts votes like a general inventorying ammunition. Brooke Lynn reminds anyone who will listen that scorched earth tactics rarely produce harvests later. Willow keeps her circle close, her children closer, and her mind steady, refusing to turn a family crisis into a spectacle. She has seen enough hospital corridors to last a lifetime. The notion that new violence could send loved ones back under fluorescent lights hardens her resolve. She cannot control Sonny, Drew, or the ghosts that eddy between them, but she can control her home, her voice, and the limits she draws around her children. Meanwhile, the city's opportunists test the air with a wet finger. Ava knows a power vacuum when she smells one, so do the less civilized operators who lack her taste for fine art and meticulous cover stories. Valentine calculates where leverage might tilt, who benefits if Corinthos looks weakened, who benefits if Drew disappears in a way that spooks the market but doesn't invite a task force. Even the more respectable corners of town, publishers, donors, the elected and the aspirational, find themselves gaming scenarios they'd rather euphemize as contingency planning. Port Charles thrives on illusion, but it runs on math, and the math says chaos is efficient only for scavengers. The moral core of the story surfaces in quieter rooms. What is justice when everyone insists the other man drew first blood? Sonny tells himself he protects the many by neutralizing the one. He also knows that the arithmetic is compromised by his love for his son. Drew frames his crusade as accountability long denied. He also knows that using Michael as a crowbar isn't justice, it's personal. Michael wants to believe in systems, oaths, and the rule of law. He also knows that men like Sonny and Drew will always act faster than any statute. Every character stands under a different light, and each light exposes both conviction and hypocrisy. If the order is carried out, the town will not simply mourn or cheer, it will contort. The hospital will fill with whispers before it fills with flowers. The police department will divide into those who want the big arrest and those who want the cleanest paperwork. The press will drag out old file photos and try to cram a complicated life into a headline that fits a phone screen. And the Corinthos clan will do what families do under siege, close ranks while quietly blaming one another for the tactic chosen, the word left unsaid, the piece that could have been moved differently on a board none of them asked to play. But if the order fails, if a bodyguard blinks, if Anna's net tightens, if fate's coin lands on its edge, the aftermath is messier still. Sonny will look exposed, and exposure is an invitation to pile on. Drew will feel invincible, and invincibility breeds recklessness. Michael will go to bed knowing that, for a sliver of time, his life depended on whether another man's finger twitched. The city will exhale, but not with relief. Rather with anticipation, because failed violence rarely settles anything, it merely resets the clock, adds new grudges, and sharpens the knives that were already honed. There's a final cruelty here. Every path forward asks the characters to be less of who they want to be. Sonny prides himself on being the man who keeps monsters outside the door. This week, he risks becoming the monster at the threshold. Drew once wore the face of redemption. Today, he swaps it for the mask of calculation and calls it clarity. Michael, the son who tried to build his life outside his father's shadow, ends up back in its center, lit like a target and defended like a crown jewel. The circle tightens, the oxygen thins, and the choice, act or abstain, strike or swerve, starts to look less like freedom and more like inevitability. And yet, in Port Charles, inevitability is never the whole story. A single confession can throw a grenade into the neatest plan. A mother's plea can stop a bullet that reason could not. A child's question, asked without strategy, asked because it hurts, can humble the proudest calculus. The people in this town have survived shipwrecks of their own making and storms no one could predict. They are practiced at stitching up wounds you can see and living with the ones you cannot. Whether Drew falls, whether Sonny relents, whether Michael is spared by mercy, luck, or law, each outcome widens or narrows the road they must walk together tomorrow. So we arrive at a day when a decision made in a whisper echoes down every hallway that matters. The hospital lights are too bright, the waterfront shadows are too dark, and somewhere between them stands a father who will do anything to protect his son and a man who decided that hurting that son was acceptable collateral in a righteous fight. The order is out there now, unblinking, unemotional, indiscriminate. If it lands, Port Charles will reel. If it doesn't, Port Charles will brace. Either way, the town is already changed, because when the choice on the table is death as a strategy, the soul of the city is the real hostage. In a place where memory is long and forgiveness is conditional, the question is not simply who will survive, but what will. Compassion that costs nothing is easy, compassion that risks everything is rare. Sonny believes he is choosing certainty over chaos, Drew believes he is choosing courage over capitulation. They may both be wrong. Or both be right, in ways too narrow to save them. What remains after the smoke clears, whether literal or metaphorical, will not be measured only in headlines and police reports, but in the quiet recalibrations, who attends whose birthday, who trusts whom with a secret, who glances over a shoulder when footsteps echo on concrete at dusk. For now, the city waits, the players maneuver, and the clock ticks with a heaviness that everyone feels and few will admit. The order hangs in the air like a storm that could drift out to sea or make landfall at midnight. Port Charles has seen its share of tempests. It has learned to board the windows, to stock candles, to call neighbors, to pray in the language of action. Perhaps the storm veers. Perhaps it doesn't. But whatever happens next, the lesson is already written between the lines. When a family feud invites a firing squad, nobody gets out untouched, not the target, not the shooter, not the hand that signed the command, and certainly not the town that has to wake up tomorrow and live with what was done in its name.